Welcome to Breaking the News Plus on this Tuesday night. We have some new documents in the shooting of Mark and Melissa Hortman and in the shooting of the Hoffmans. It's basically a timeline of what happened with the police and how they responded to those shootings and the whole 24, 48 hours of the suspect Vance Belter on the run. Lou Raguse has gotten his hand on these documents that just came out to us today. I think the paper got them yesterday. Yep. But these documents give some new information that we have never seen. To me, the part that shines out the most is that when Brooklyn Park Police went to the Hortman house, they didn't go in and look for Melissa right away.
Right. And that was the way that the Star Tribune characterized it. Was they called it a 31-minute wait. And that does push some buttons with Brooklyn Park Police Chief Mark Bruley. He sent out a press release months ago when the Star Tribune first had a report about the police response to the assassinations of the Hortmans and the shootings of the Hoffmans. Back up for a second. So the new documents that came out are essentially dispatch logs.
Okay.
And what that is, it's all these little time codes with the information that was sent back to the Hennepin County dispatcher. So, for example, it says shots fired, at the point that they witnessed the shots being fired at the Hortman home, and it has a timestamp to tell you what time that happened.
Okay.
And so it kind of has every little movement, every little thing that was reported back to the dispatcher is logged within there.
Okay, let's go back to those details because it's been 10 months now, and the people listening and watching may not remember. Brooklyn Park Police went to the Hortman house after the Hoffman shooting had happened.
Yes.
When Senator John Hoffman, Yvette, and Hope were all attacked in their home.
And so they went there proactively.
Proactively because they said, somebody smartly said, we need to check on all of our lawmakers in this area. So they go to the Hortman house. And when they get there, they see Mark Hortman get shot. So
Yes.
they're there right at that moment. Take me from there.
So I think they get there, and it is a little bit confusing because they see, and also, allegedly because he hasn't been convicted, but I'll say Vance Belter. They see the gunman outside, who we believe is Vance Belter. It's a little confusing at first, but then they actually witness the interaction at the doorway in which the gunman, Vance Belter, shoots Mark Hortman. Now, I haven't been able to talk with Chief Bruley yet for this.
Brooklyn Park Chief.
He's the chief of Brooklyn Park Police. That's the responding agency there. He did give an interview on WCCO radio yesterday with Jason DeRusha, Drive Time with DeRusha. And what he said, and he had some new details in that interview. He said that the officers thought that it was Melissa who got shot at the doorway. And they engaged Belter with gunfire. They thought that he was shooting at them. They shot at him. And then Belter ran into the house. When they thought that they could safely get up to the doorway to grab the victim, and it was actually inside of the doorway, Chief Bruley said, they grabbed Mark Hortman and dragged him out so that they could safely do CPR at a spot that was safe to do so. And at that point, they realized it was not Melissa. Now, that's where more questions start to raise, in my mind, because at that point, we don't know. They were sent there to check on Melissa Hortman. Obviously, this is not Melissa Hortman. So then where is she? Did they wonder where she is? Did they wonder if she was still inside the house? Did they wonder if she was hurt? What Chief Bruley said in this interview is that at that point, they didn't think that there was a second shooting because the gunfire kind of all happened at once. So Chief Bruley's theory is that Mark Hortman was shot and Melissa Hortman was shot and the dog was shot all at kind of the same time, like in the same flurry of gunfire. And the responding police did not know that there was any other victims other than the first victim they saw, which turned out to be Mark Hortman.
Right, but the burning question from that, and what we don't exactly know, and I haven't seen an answer to, is once they realize it's Mark Hortman or a male, and they know they are there to do a welfare check on the former speaker, Melissa Hortman, and there's no shots being fired at that time, why aren't they going in the house to check on Melissa Hortman?
The answer that Chief Bruley gave in that interview is that in their mind, it was no longer a quote-unquote active shooter situation where there's no more shots going on. The shooting is over at that point. So then they slow it down and they calculate what is the best approach here. They called Melissa Hortman at that point, called the house.
The police did.
To try to reach her. They didn't know I think they thought actually that Vance Belter was inside the house at that point. And so they thought, what Bruley said in the interview is if they bum rush in there, they might cause more danger to a hostage. If Melissa Hortman was being held at gunpoint inside the house, he might shoot her right in front of them at that point. So they start to treat it more like a standoff situation at that point until they get the drone that they can fly into the house to look it over. And that's where what the Star Tribune referred to as a 31-minute wait. That's what that is, the time in between when the shooting happened and when they finally enter the house with a drone and see the body of Melissa Hortman and their dog lying there.
But even when the drone comes, there is still a significant period of time before they go in. They see a woman on the stairs, and that woman is Melissa Hortman. Why not go in right then?
We don't have an answer to that, except for in the notes it does say that they believed her to be dead at that point.
Okay. And can the drone show any sign of life? Does it have heat sense, anything like that?
I mean, it does, yes, but it wouldn't. On somebody who was just shot, you wouldn't be able to tell from a heat sensor drone.
Obviously, this is all very sensitive, and it isn't just a Monday morning quarterback the Brooklyn Park Police Department. This was horrible. And Chief Bruley did say on Drive Time with DeRusha, he said, look, Melissa Hortman was my friend. So this was obviously someone in his department, if not him, was smart enough to say, go check on every lawmaker, and Melissa Hortman lives at this address. So that's a positive that they were even there at that point. But there are questions, I can't imagine, that some people aren't asking in their hearts and minds of, was she alive? Could she have been saved?
Right. We don't know. I don't personally know whether she died instantly from her injuries or not.
Right.
So that question I can't answer. I don't know if others can answer if they feel strongly about that one way or another. There is an after-action report being done, which is a review of the police actions. It's being paid for by the city of Brooklyn Park, the city of Champlin, Hennepin County, and the state of Minnesota. And that is looking at all of these questions and determining. I've talked with law enforcement sources who, and this is a good way to put it, in their mind, two things can be true at once, that the officers did act heroically and they should have gone in that house. And two things can be true at the same time. That's kind of the take that I've heard. But yes, there are law enforcement leaders in our state that believe those officers should have gone into that house in case there was another victim, to try to apprehend Vance Belter after the initial shooting, and so on.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because that is a critical point here, that two things can be true at once. When we zoom out and look at this from a big picture standpoint, when those officers arrive from Brooklyn Park, think about what they see. They see a fake police car in the driveway, but right when you see it, is that what they're looking for? Is this what they see someone that looks like a police officer, then they see shots fired and they're thinking this is happening. They go to get that victim and it's not the victim they thought it was. The shooting has stopped. At the same time, their department is fanning out across the state. Where is this guy? What's happening? What's going on? This is a difficult after-action report to put together.
Yes.
Because of what happened that night.
Yes. But I think people are very strongly sharing their opinions.
Sure.
Chief Bruley's opinion, which he said yesterday on the interview on the radio, is that he would have done the same thing they did. And so he's defending his officers. He said he would have done the exact same thing if he was in that situation.
Render aid to Mark and wait for the drone to get a good look.
I don't think he would phrase it like that. He would phrase it as slow it down.
Okay.
Just rushing into the house without having a plan, in his opinion, wouldn't have been the right thing to do. Or, maybe it's not necessarily that was the right thing to do, but it wasn't a wrong. There's decisions that need to be made in split seconds, and there's not necessarily one right answer and one wrong answer.
Right.
So he doesn't think that they acted inappropriately. He says he would have done the same thing.
And that's fair. And that's why they do these reports, right? Where you have an independent body look at it. And it's just if we're being honest as a state and we all want to learn from this, then we learn from this in this time and don't use it as an opportunity to say, you were wrong, you did this, you did that. There was another bit of information in this report that I thought was interesting and kind of spoke to the tone and tenor of that early morning and how frantic it was. It's a note about something that happened at Mercy Hospital. That's where John and Yvette and perhaps Hope, I don't know, but John and Yvette were taken, the Hoffmans. And they had to be split up when they were being cared for. and hospital staff had to tell everybody to not allow anybody in uniform to approach anyone without prior approval. So hospitals are on alert too. Like, is this person going to come here?
Yeah.
What are we dealing with?
Right. I mean, that's extremely scary. And I've heard of other cases where the victim comes in, they have to be admitted as like a John Doe or a Jane Doe because the dangerous person is still out there. And they don't know what kind of lies or what they might present themselves as in order to get to those people. So that's a reality that hospitals, in particular, HCMC and North Memorial, have to deal with in situations like that. You're right. That is that's a very striking detail. There is one other thing that I'd like to add as well. So, Brooklyn Park thought that there was a good chance that the shooter would still be in that house. His vehicle was
in the Hortman house.
In the Hortman house, his vehicle was still outside.
Right.
And so, with that, they were able to prevent him, with his arsenal of weapons at least, from moving on to the next place. And that was a point that Bruley raised in his interview. Is that it's not as if he ran to his car, drove away, and was on to he had a hit list. To the next person on his hit list
in his car. Right.
In his car, he ran off on foot. Apparently through a golf course, which is right out the back. He was able to make it all the way home. And now this is where another question raises for me. So he had a home in Green Isle, which is outside of the Twin Cities a little bit. They were able to identify his home address within an hour there at his vehicle because they were able to run the vehicle, figure out who owned it, figure out where their home address was. They had Vance Belter's name at that point. They also had his home address. I'm curious to know how soon somebody got to the Belter residence, because he was arrested, right in the field outside of it there.
Right.
So he obviously went home eventually when he was able to make it there.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And one to keep in mind, too, as you digest all of this information in this new report, Belter's car, or the suspect's car, that was in front of the Hortman home, that was outfitted in police gear, that had more ammunition, firearms in it, and that list of addresses, of names. All of that evidence was just sitting right there because he had to, I think they presume, he just went out the back door of the Hortman home.
Yes, I think that's what the evidence showed.
Right.
And he, ditched his mask, and there was some other evidence kind of trailed as he left out the back.
And so, the key takeaway in this is that period of time, and the chief has talked to Jason DeRusha and given his side of it. And I guess to me, the most important thing is to wait for this after-action report. I had reached out to both the Hoffman family and the Hortman family, and they're not going to comment on what's in this report because what people have to remember, too, is there's still a trial that's about to take place for Vance Belter, and he could be facing the death penalty. So they don't want to say a lot about this kind of stuff. That will all come out in trial. Exactly.
Now, that raises another issue, though, because this after-action report is something that I think everybody wants to see. It's paid for. People want to see. They want to know what the results are. But if it reflects poorly on law enforcement in any way, will prosecutors allow it to be released prior to the trial? Because if it could provide any sort of ammunition for Vance Belter to use in his defense, is it something that they want? So these are real issues that they're considering right now, and I know that for a fact.
Okay.
Vance Belter is, as of right now, going to be tried in federal court first. We're looking, the earliest at this point that we'd be looking at would be next winter, because the prosecutor, they haven't made a decision whether to seek the death penalty or not. The prosecutor said that the DOJ in Washington, D.C. won't make that decision until potentially Labor Day. Once that decision is made, then the lawyering really heats up, leading up to the trial. Potential, plea offers, if they put the death penalty on the table, would he plead guilty to life in prison if they don't seek death? Those are negotiation tactics that'll happen. But then this after-action report, will we see it before there's a trial? I don't know right now.
That's an interesting thing to keep in mind. Well, this is the latest in a story that's not even a year old. Hard to imagine that just 10 months after we lost Mark and Melissa, and Jana and Yvette were shot, and our state and our nation were shocked. Lou, thank you so much for talking about it today.
Absolutely.
That's all for Breaking the News Plus tonight. We'll see you next time.